Here are some common cognitive distortions that you might find if you do some research of your own. They are from CBT therapy, and they can also be called unhelpful thinking patterns. So there are 12 common ones that would be used in CBT therapy. We have the idea of a mental filter, which is only paying attention to certain types of evidence. So more so looking at failures and negatives as opposed to the successes that you might have and other positive things. All or nothing thinking. This can also be referred to as black or white thinking. So it's looking at the idea that there's no sort of grey area in the middle. You know, if I'm not perfect, then I failed. Either I do it right or not at all. Either I win or I'm totally rubbish at something. Or there's overgeneralizing, so seeing a pattern based upon a single event or being overly broad in the conclusions we draw. So you may find that you've had a negative experience of something 3 times out of 10, but you may say, it's always rubbish, it always goes wrong. Jumping to conclusions. So there are 2 key types of jumping to conclusions. We've got mind reading and fortune telling. So this could be assuming what somebody thinks about you, or what somebody is thinking about a situation, or it could be trying to predict what's going to happen. Personalisation. So this is very much about blaming yourself, or conversely, blaming other people for something that was your fault. So shoulds and musts. By shoulding and musting, that should be like that. This must happen. You are creating unrealistic expectations for yourself, for other people, and for situations. Emotional reasoning, assuming that because we feel a certain way, that it must be true. Same as if we were to think in that way as well. So the example that's been given is, I feel embarrassed, so I must be an idiot. I think I'm not very good at this, so I must be rubbish. Labelling. So assigning labels to ourselves or other people. For example, I'm a loser, I'm stupid, I'm useless, I'm an idiot. And disqualifying the positives. So discounting the good things that have happened or that you have done for some reason or another. That doesn't count. So someone may be trying to persuade you that you're actually quite kind because they saw you pick something up off of the floor and put it in the bin. You might say, well, that doesn't make me kind, that doesn't count because everybody does that. So by doing these types of thoughts and this type of thinking, you're much more likely to see the world and yourself in a much more negative light. And as a result, you may experience much more negative self-esteem and sense of self-worth. Or you may view the world as a much more negative place. So you're much more likely to experience mental health difficulties or maybe a negative sense of well-being. Here you may see some of the same or very similar cognitive distortions to the previous slide, but we do have a few extra on here too. We have, for example, predicting worst case scenarios. For if I try to cross the road, I will definitely be run over. For example, jumping to negative conclusions, what if thinking. What if thinking is a really common one. I want to go there, but what if? What if this happens? What if people laugh at me? And exaggerating the likelihood. If I go into that room, everybody's probably going to laugh at me. We have putting yourself down, unrealistic expectations. We touched on that in the last slide when we were looking at shoulds and musts. And I can't thinking, so that just real having a lack of confidence in yourself and belief in yourself. and negative comparisons. So negative comparisons are key, especially when looking at self-esteem, because self-esteem is built upon how we see ourselves in the world and how we think others see us. So the reason these are in two separate columns are because the thought patterns on the left are very much looking at thoughts about a situation, whereas the ones on the right are looking at thoughts about ourselves. So all of these can produce anxiety, they can lead to anxiety and our want to avoid situations, people, and they affect how we think about ourselves, so they can really affect our self-esteem. And as we spoke about in the previous slide, both of these can have a real detrimental effect on our mental health. One very helpful skill we can learn to try and overcome these cognitive distortions, unhelpful thinking patterns, whatever we'd like to call them, is challenging our thoughts and thinking more realistically. It's about noticing that we are doing those types of thoughts. So it's really helpful to really look through the cognitive distortions and examples we've given you and really understand them so that you can notice them when you are doing it yourself. And then stop that thought. The next thing we want to do is assess it. Why am I thinking like this? Am I doing a cognitive distortion? Am I thinking negatively about myself? Why am I thinking negatively about myself? Is it a fact or is it just a thought? Next, we want to challenge that. We might tell ourselves, no, it's not a fact. This is just something that I believe. We might say, especially if we're what if thinking, we might say, okay, well, what if? Let's plan around that. What is the real likelihood that that's going to happen? We might ask ourselves lots of questions to really challenge those thoughts and disprove those thoughts to find the real facts. And then what we can also do is replace that thought with a new one that's a more positive thought. This is something that's not easily done and needs a lot of practice. The more we do it, the more automatic it will be. But we might find that actually we need a bit of support doing this, or especially with our young people, we might need to help them do this process a lot. We might need to help them catch themselves in these thoughts. The more we practice it, like I say, the more automatic it becomes and the less effort it is. We might even find ourselves not actively doing this process and actually thinking more positively as a result.